They swore you'd never leave. They looked into your eyes and saw someone they thought they could keep forever, someone too loyal, too forgiving, too soft to walk away. They believed their position in your life was permanent, untouchable, secured by your love. But love has its limits, and they found yours, because even the kindest soul gets tired of being disrespected. Even the warmest heart knows when to go cold. They thought your love was blind, but it was patient. It saw everything, the lies, the manipulation, the arrogance, and still stayed, hoping they'd rise to meet it. But when you realized they only took from you, you stopped offering. You stopped explaining. You stopped caring. You didn't scream, you didn't cry, you didn't beg. You just detached, quietly, cleanly, lethally. That's what broke them. Not the goodbye, the indifference. Because they expected a scene, a meltdown, a final emotional plea. But you gave them silence, and that silence hit harder than any words ever could. You didn't just walk away, you vanished emotionally long before your physical absence. They felt the distance long before you packed your piece and left. Now, they tell people you were cold, that you gave up too easily. But the truth is, you gave them more chances than they ever deserved. You fought battles alone that they didn't even notice. You tried to hold together something they were actively tearing apart, and when you finally let it fall, they blamed you for the wreckage they caused. They can't handle the fact that you moved on without looking back. They thought your love was their safety net, something that would always catch them no matter how many times they jumped carelessly. But when they leapt one last time and hit the ground, they realized the net was gone. You were gone. Now, they romanticize the chaos. They remember your patience, your loyalty, your softness, the very things they took for granted, and it eats at them. Because they know you're never coming back. They know there's nothing left to fix. You loved them like they were everything, but left them like they were nothing, and that contradiction is what keeps them awake at night. They thought they could play with your emotions, use your love like a leash, pull you back whenever they wanted. But you broke the leash without warning. You didn't announce your freedom, you just walked out of the cage they built for you. And now they're left wondering how someone who loved so deeply could disappear so completely. That's what real strength looks like, not in the staying, but in the leaving. You mastered the art of letting go without hatred. You didn't need revenge, didn't need closure, didn't need them to understand. You simply decided that your peace mattered more than their presence. You gave them something they could never give you: finality. Now, every time they see someone who reminds them of you, their stomach twists. Every smile that looks like yours stings. Every song that echoes your energy feels like a haunting. Because deep down, they know they weren't ready for your love, and they'll never find it again. You became their ghost, their unfinished story, their greatest regret. And maybe that's poetic justice, because they thought you'd always choose them. They thought you'd always bend, but you chose yourself this time, and that's what they'll never forgive you for. Not the leaving, not the silence, the fact that you had the strength to stop loving them when they kept showing you reasons not to. They call you heartless now, but that's just projection. They can't accept that you loved them enough to stay once and respected yourself enough to leave when it was over. They can't believe that the same person who used to fight for them can now look through them like they're a stranger. That's what kills them, that your love turned into indifference so effortlessly. And now, they're stuck where you left them, in the ruins of their own ego, replaying every moment, searching for the version of you that no longer exists. You evolved, you ascended, you became untouchable. They're still there, staring at the door you closed, whispering your name into the void, waiting for an echo that never comes. You see, they thought they owned your love, but your love was never theirs to own, it was yours to give. And when they proved unworthy of it, you reclaimed it. You didn't lose them. They lost access to the best version of themselves, the one your presence brought out. Now, your peace mocks their chaos. Your silence exposes their noise. And your happiness, that calm, unbothered glow, is the revenge they never saw coming. They thought you'd crumble without them. Instead, you built a life so beautiful, it hurts them to look. That's the cruel irony. They wanted to see you broken, but you became untouchable. They thought they could define your worth, but now, your success defines their regret. You became the lesson they didn't want to learn. So, when they think of you now, it's with that sickening mix of admiration and agony. They whisper your name like a forbidden prayer, wondering how someone they once dismissed could become the one who got away, the one who won by leaving. Because, in the end, they were right about one thing. You did love them. You loved them fiercely, sincerely, completely. But you loved yourself more. And that's what they never saw coming the moment you stopped trying to prove your love and started protecting your peace. You didn't give up on them. You simply gave up on bleeding for people who never learned to stop cutting you. They still tell themselves stories at night, comforting lies to help them sleep. They say you left because you were cold, that you changed, that you gave up. But they never mention what pushed you there. They never mention how you stayed long after your heart was breaking, how you kept choosing them even when they gave you reasons not to. They rewrite the ending to make themselves the victim, because the truth is too ugly. They killed something pure and expected it to resurrect for their convenience. They didn't expect you to disappear so cleanly, so permanently. They thought they could breadcrumb you back whenever they needed that old version of you, the one who'd drop everything just to fix what they broke. But the version of you that loved them doesn't exist anymore. That version died quietly in all the moments they made you feel like you didn't matter. Now, when they talk about you, there's hesitation in their voice, a crack in their tone, a ghost of guilt behind their pride. They say your name carefully, like a wound they're afraid to reopen, because somewhere deep down, they know they were never good to you. They know your leaving wasn't betrayal, it was self-defense. They're haunted by the simplicity of it all. You didn't scream, didn't seek revenge, didn't even explain. You just left, calm, silent, unapologetic. That silence became their punishment. Because now they have to live in the echo of their own actions, replaying the last moments and realizing they were the ones who pushed you to the door. It wasn't hate that made you leave, it was realization. The realization that love without respect is just attachment, that staying where you're undervalued isn't loyalty, it's self-betrayal. So you chose yourself, and that single choice shattered the illusion they had of control. You became unpredictable, and that's what terrifies them most. You no longer dance to their tune. You don't react to their attempts to provoke. You don't even acknowledge their existence, and that kills them more than any confrontation ever could, because attention was their oxygen, and your indifference is their suffocation. You turned your absence into power, and now they choke on it every time they remember what they lost. They scroll through your photos, pretending not to care, but their hearts drop with every glimpse of your peace. How dare you glow after they dimmed your light? How dare you thrive after they tried to break you? They can't accept that you didn't just recover, you evolved, you became something beyond them. Now, they try to mimic your calm, your composure, your energy, but imitation can't hide emptiness. They'll post, they'll laugh, they'll flaunt, but it's hollow, because you can't fake peace. And every performance they put on only reminds them how real yours is. They wanted you to need them, but now they need your strength just to keep pretending. They used to believe your love was their greatest advantage. Now, they realize it was their greatest loss. Because when you love, you build people. You breathe life into them. You make them believe they can be more. And when you leave, that light goes out. They're left alone in the darkness, with only the echo of what they destroyed. They're sorry now not because they've changed, but because you did. They see that you've made peace with their absence, that you've built a life where they no longer fit. And that truth stings worse than any insult, worse than any rejection. Because now, you represent everything they lost through their own carelessness. You became the reminder of what they'll never get back: trust, loyalty, real love. You were their lesson in value, the price of arrogance. And now, no matter who they meet, they'll search for pieces of you but find only fragments that don't measure up. Every new connection will feel like a downgrade. Every smile will feel like a copy, because there was only one you, and they wasted it. They thought they were playing a simple game: manipulation, betrayal, control, but they had no idea whose story they'd stepped into. They didn't know they were dealing with someone chosen, someone anointed by pain, refined by fire, and guided by something far greater than luck. They thought they could break you, but how do you break what was built by divinity? They didn't realize that while they plotted in shadows, the universe was taking notes. Every lie, every scheme, every mask they wore was seen. The irony is divine. They thought they were winning, while every cruel move they made was pushing you closer to your purpose. They weren't your downfall, they were your confirmation, proof that you were never ordinary. You were chosen. They laughed when you fell, mistook the silence of your rebuilding for weakness. But what they didn't know was that even in your lowest moments, you were never alone. There was something ancient moving through you: patience, wisdom, divine timing. They played tricks while the heavens prepared your comeback. You were never losing, you were being positioned. They mocked your kindness, scoffed at your faith, rolled their eyes at your calm. But the chosen don't need to prove themselves. They let time do the talking. Every stone thrown at you became part of your foundation. Every betrayal became a lesson written in fire. And when the storm cleared, there you stood, untouched, unbothered, undeniable. That's divine justice, not loud, not dramatic, inevitable. They called it coincidence. You call it divine design, because every time they tried to bury you, the ground became fertile. Every attempt to destroy you only watered your growth. They never realized you were built differently, that you had a light they couldn't dim, a purpose they couldn't comprehend. You weren't surviving by luck, you were surviving by calling. See, being chosen isn't about perfection, it's about endurance. It's about walking through hell with grace and coming out without bitterness. It's about understanding that rejection is protection and betrayal is direction. They thought they broke your spirit, but they only broke their illusion of control. You didn't lose them, they lost their access to divinity disguised as you. Now, they watch, confused, haunted, because everything they did to humiliate you became the reason people respect you. They tried to stain your name, and in doing so, they painted themselves guilty. The same mouths that mocked you now speak your name with trembling respect. They've realized too late you weren't meant to be liked. You were meant to be legendary. They don't talk about it openly, but they feel it, that eerie sense of cosmic imbalance. The universe keeps reminding them who they touched. Doors that once opened for them start closing. Plans fall apart. Nothing feels aligned, because when you touch the chosen with bad intent, you pay in silence, not through lightning or thunder, but through slow, undeniable karma. You didn't have to lift a hand. You didn't have to plot revenge. You just kept walking, kept building, kept shining. And that's the kind of punishment they can't escape, watching you rise while everything they tried to use against you turns into your glory. They wanted to make you a lesson. Instead, they became the warning. They thought they'd erased you, but the chosen don't disappear, they ascend. They thought they'd end your story, but the chosen don't end, they evolve. Every setback became part of your prophecy. Every betrayal, a stepping stone. And now when people speak your name, it carries weight, power, legacy, the kind that can't be faked or fabricated. You didn't need their validation. You had something far stronger, divine favor. That's why they couldn't understand how you kept winning. They called it luck, but deep down, they knew it was something else. You were protected. Every door that closed was rerouting you towards something sacred. Every delay was a setup for your reveal. Now, they whisper, how are they still standing? How did they come back stronger? They can't comprehend that your strength was never human, it was heavenly. You weren't fighting for attention, you were fulfilling prophecy. You weren't just surviving people, you were surviving purpose. And the most poetic part? You forgave them. Not because they deserved it, but because you knew their hands weren't strong enough to touch destiny. You knew their betrayal was necessary for your transformation. You thanked the pain because it introduced you to your power. You embraced the silence because it led you to peace. So now, when they see you calm, radiant, untouchable, they feel something between awe and regret, because they finally realize the truth. They weren't fighting you, they were fighting God's plan. And that's a battle no one wins. Let them talk. Let them wonder. Let them twist their stories to ease their guilt. You don't need to defend your name, the universe already has. The divine doesn't argue, it proves. And you are living proof that no weapon formed against the chosen ever truly prospers. They tried to make you the villain, but the heavens made you the revelation. They tried to destroy your faith, but they only made it unshakable. You walked through betrayal and came out with power. You walked through fire and came out glowing. You were never meant to blend in, you were meant to stand out, so bright that it blinds those who wished you harm. And now, when they hear your name, they don't just remember what they did, they remember what they lost. You were the divine favor they fumbled, the rare light they disrespected, the chosen one they thought they could outsmart. But destiny doesn't negotiate. It doesn't pause for envy or ignorance. It moves forward, unstoppable, eternal. And you are its proof. You were the chosen one all along, the storm that cleansed, the fire that refined, the miracle that survived everything meant to destroy it. So let them regret. Let them watch in silence as your peace becomes your crown, your success their reminder, your existence their karma. They didn't know who they were messing with. They thought they were hurting a person. They were challenging the chosen. They never understood that your calmness wasn't weakness, it was awareness. You saw through their intentions long before they acted. You watched the game unfold with the stillness of someone who already knew the ending. You didn't rush to expose them. You let time do that for you. Because divine patience isn't passive, it's strategic. And while they were busy throwing stones, you were quietly building a throne. Now, they look back and realize every cruel word, every deceptive move, every fake smile they offered, all of it only served to sculpt your greatness. They sharpened your edges without realizing it. They refined you with betrayal, strengthened you with abandonment. You were never breaking, you were becoming. That's the difference between them and the chosen. They wound easily. You rise inevitably. They mocked your silence. But silence is where the chosen gather their strength. It's where visions are formed, strategies are written, and destinies are sealed. They thought your absence was retreat, but it was resurrection. When you disappeared, they assumed you were defeated. They didn't realize you were being realigned. And when you returned, you didn't come back the same. You came back colder, wiser, quieter, the kind of quiet that unsettles even the loudest of liars. Because your energy changed. You no longer craved validation. You no longer begged to be understood. You simply existed, unbothered, untouchable, a walking reminder that divine favor doesn't flinch. They hate it now. They hate that they can't provoke you. They hate that their chaos no longer affects your peace. They hate that you learn to love your solitude, to treat silence like sanctuary. But deep down, they know they created this version of you. Every scar, every loss, every heartbreak, all of it was their contribution to your awakening. They still try to convince themselves you got lucky, that your success was timing, that your peace was fake. But late at night, when they scroll through the remnants of what was, they know better. They know they met someone divinely protected, someone their lies couldn't destroy, their envy couldn't reach, their betrayal couldn't bury. You were never meant to fall at their hands. You were meant to rise in their absence. Now, they whisper your name differently, not with arrogance, but with hesitation, because your story exposes them. Your peace convicts them. Your glow unsettles them. You are a living mirror reflecting everything they pretended to be but never could. They tried to curse you, but they ended up teaching you clarity. And the universe, oh, it has a sense of humor now. It's them feeling the silence. Now it's them feeling forgotten, irrelevant, small, because the chosen never chase, they ascend. And when they do, everything not meant for them falls away, naturally, painfully, perfectly. They thought your silence meant weakness. They thought your calm meant surrender. But what they never understood was that your silence was never submission, it was restraint. It was the sound of a monster on a leash, a storm contained behind a smile. You weren't afraid to respond. You were simply wise enough to know that your response would end everything. So you let them talk. You let them throw their little tantrums of disrespect, never realizing they were dancing at the edge of your patience. You sat there, quiet, not because you didn't feel the sting, but because you knew exactly what would happen if you let that darkness inside you speak. They saw silence. You felt war. Every breath you took was a decision not to unleash the part of you that doesn't forgive, that doesn't argue, the part that ends things permanently. You were protecting them from the version of yourself that only comes out when pushed too far. They took your calmness for cowardice. They mistook your composure for fear. What they didn't realize was that your silence was your power move. You weren't letting them win. You were letting them reveal themselves. And oh, how they did, loud, messy, desperate for attention. You watched them burn bridges and expose their own insecurities, while you sat back, untouched, letting their noise define them. Every time you stayed quiet, you were rewriting the rules. You weren't reacting to disrespect, you were studying it. Every insult was a data point, every betrayal a lesson. You were collecting information, understanding patterns, mastering control. They were busy trying to trigger you, not realizing you were 3 steps ahead, calm not because you didn't care, but because you knew the value of patience. You see, anyone can lash out, anyone can explode and lose control, but it takes power, real, dangerous power, to sit in silence when you're disrespected and still keep your dignity intact. That's the kind of control that frightens people. Because silence backed by intelligence feels like a threat, and it is. It's the warning before the storm. It's the sound before a downfall. They'll never understand that your silence wasn't passive, it was strategic. You weren't ignoring them, you were outgrowing them. You weren't suppressing your anger, you were redirecting it into something more useful: success, evolution, self-mastery. They were too busy watching your face to see what was happening behind your eyes. And by the time they realized the power behind your stillness, it was too late. They wanted chaos, and you gave them peace, the most painful kind. Because peace means you've detached. It means their words, their disrespect, their noise, none of it matters anymore. And that's what truly breaks people like them. They can't stand to lose control over your emotions. They can't stand that you don't react, don't chase, don't explain. Your silence becomes their punishment. You weren't calm because you didn't care. You were calm because you did once. But they mistook your care for permission to cross lines. So you showed them what happens when kindness expires. That quiet glare, that still posture, it wasn't surrender. It was the monster whispering, "Be grateful I'm not speaking." And when you finally walked away, it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was surgical. You cut off what disrespected you with the precision of someone who's mastered detachment. They expected rage, maybe tears, maybe confrontation. Instead, they got nothing. No reaction, no closure, no second chance, just silence. And that silence was deafening. Now they think about it every day. That quiet moment when they went too far and you didn't say a word. That's what haunts them. Not the argument they expected, not the explosion they wanted, but the eerie calm that followed, because that's when they realized they awakened something that no longer cared. Your silence was the monster's smile, the final warning before extinction. You didn't fight back, not because you couldn't, but because they were never worth your destruction. You understood that sometimes the strongest move isn't to react, it's to rise, to turn your back, walk away, and let your peace destroy what your anger never could. That's the part they'll never grasp. You weren't holding back because you were scared. You were holding back because you were merciful. You didn't need to shout to prove a point. Your absence became the loudest statement. And now when they talk about you, there's always that nervous tone, because deep down they know. They know they met the monster once and survived only because you let them. They'll call it arrogance, coldness, indifference, anything but what it truly was. Control. The kind of control that comes from understanding your worth, from realizing that not everyone deserves to witness the storm inside you. Some people only deserve the silence that follows their disrespect. And that's your real power, not the monster you could unleash, but the discipline to keep it chained. Because true strength isn't about destroying what hurts you, it's about becoming so untouchable that nothing can. So let them call your silence weakness. Let them mistake your peace for passivity. They'll learn eventually. Everyone does. They'll see that the calmest person in the room is always the one holding the most power. And when they finally understand it, when they realize the silence they mocked was actually mercy, they'll remember that moment, that cold stillness, that quiet smile, and they'll never forget it. Because that's when they met the truth. You weren't quiet because you were afraid. You were quiet because your monster was listening. They'll spend the rest of their lives replaying that moment, the moment they disrespected you and you didn't react. That silence became their haunting. They expected anger, expected you to lose control, expected chaos. But instead you gave them stillness, and that's what broke them. Because no sound is louder to the guilty than silence from the one they wronged. They didn't understand that your silence wasn't an empty void, it was a message. A cold, deliberate statement that said, "I saw what you did, and I decided you're not worth my energy." That kind of calm hits harder than rage ever could. It tells them they're irrelevant now. And for people who live off attention, irrelevance is death. They call you emotionless now, say you've changed. But you didn't change, you evolved. You simply stopped bleeding for people who kept cutting you. You stopped defending your name in conversations that didn't deserve your voice. You stopped explaining your side of the story to people who already made up their minds. That's not coldness, that's clarity. They used to laugh when you stayed quiet. They thought they were winning those little battles of disrespect. But what they didn't realize is that your silence wasn't retreat, it was preparation. You were building a life where their opinions meant nothing. You were constructing peace brick by brick, each moment of restraint becoming a part of your fortress. And now, from that fortress, you look down at the chaos they still live in. They keep shouting, fighting, gossiping, desperate for relevance. Meanwhile, you've mastered the art of indifference. You've learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all, because silence, when used with precision, becomes a language of power. They don't like it now. Your calmness makes them uncomfortable. Your stillness exposes their instability. They want you to react, to crack, to fall into the trap again. But you don't, you just observe. Because you've learned the secret. People who disrespect you once will do it again if you give them the chance. So you give them nothing. No reaction, no access, no entry. And that's what terrifies them, the realization that they no longer have the ability to reach you. They can talk, mock, twist your name in circles, but none of it touches you anymore. You're untouchable, not because you fought your way out, but because you rose above the noise entirely. They can't hurt someone who no longer lives on their frequency. Your silence is now your armor. It's not that you don't feel, you feel everything deeply, but you've learned to master your emotions, not to be mastered by them. They still operate on impulse, while you've learned the art of self-control. That gap between their chaos and your calm is where your power lives. You used to think that speaking up, defending yourself, reacting was strength. But now you know, real strength is quiet. It doesn't beg to be understood. It doesn't fight for recognition. It just exists firm, steady, undeniable. And that's what you became, undeniable. Every time they see you now, composed and unbothered, they flinch a little. They don't know what to say. How do you confront someone who's no longer available to your drama? How do you fight a ghost that won't even show up to the battlefield? That's the power of your silence. It makes them battle themselves. They'll call it arrogance because they can't name what it truly is, peace. The kind of peace that comes after chaos, earned through pain, shaped by restraint. They'll say you're different, but that's only because they can't accept that they created the version of you that doesn't need them anymore. You learn that silence is not a lack of power, it's the evolution of it. Because words can be twisted, actions can be misread, but silence cannot be manipulated. It simply is. It demands respect without asking for it, and you learn to wield it like a blade, sharp, precise, final. They never saw it coming. They thought you were just another casualty, another name to fade away in the credits, another soul broken by their cruelty. They thought their betrayal would destroy you, that their disrespect would silence you, that their lies would erase your spark. But oh, how wrong they were. You weren't the tragedy of the story, you were the turning point. You weren't the downfall, you were the climax. They thought your silence was surrender. They thought your absence was defeat. What they didn't realize was that you were simply gathering momentum, letting the noise burn itself out while you sharpened your purpose. They thought they'd written your ending, but the truth is, you were only in the middle of your rise. You were never meant to be the victim, you were destined to be the revelation. You see, people like them thrive on seeing others break. They feed on reaction, on validation, on chaos. But you didn't give them any of that. You didn't crumble. You didn't beg. You didn't chase. You simply vanished into your silence, and that silence became your power. While they were busy performing their false victory, you were busy rewriting the story in your favor. And when you came back calm, composed, unbothered, they didn't know how to process it, because people like them expect pain, not peace. They expect tears, not transformation. They wanted to see you shattered. Instead, they saw you shining. They wanted to see you lost. Instead, they found themselves irrelevant. You didn't just survive, you shifted the entire tone of the story. They made you a subplot, but you became the main event. They thought they'd close the chapter, but you became the whole book. That's what true power looks like, not vengeance, not destruction, but evolution. The kind that leaves everyone stunned because you didn't just move on. You leveled up, and that's the part that haunts them now. You were supposed to break, but you built. You were supposed to fade, but you flourished. They can't comprehend how the same person they tried to bury became the heartbeat of the story, the climax that redefined everything. Now, when your name comes up, the room changes. There's a pause, a silence, a recognition that they underestimated you, that the one they mocked, doubted, and discarded became the standard. You became the proof that pain doesn't end you, it refines you. That endings aren't always losses, sometimes they're transformations. You didn't just survive what they did, you turned it into fuel. Every insult became motivation. Every betrayal became clarity. Every failure became focus. You didn't just walk through the fire, you became it. And now, when they look at you, they see the flames of everything they thought would destroy you, burning quietly in your eyes. That's what makes you dangerous. You don't need revenge. You don't need recognition. You don't even need closure. Your success is the closure. Your peace is the payback. You became untouchable because you stopped looking for justice in places that couldn't handle your truth. You let time reveal what you already knew, that the one who stays silent often becomes the loudest name in the end. They used to talk about you. Now, they talk around you. Because deep down, they know they can't handle the fact that they created the very thing they now fear, your evolution. You became a living reminder of their failure. The moment they tried to break you was the same moment they unknowingly built their own downfall. They thought they had the power because they caused your pain. But the real power came when you turned that pain into purpose. When you stopped trying to prove your worth to the unworthy. When you chose distance over drama, peace over performance, silence over screaming. That's when the plot flipped. That's when the climax began. Now, they can't write you off. You're too evolved, too aware, too centered. You exist in a space they can't reach emotionally, mentally, spiritually. You're not a participant in their chaos anymore. You're the mirror that exposes it. You're what happens when pain grows teeth and learns to smile. And that's what hurts them the most. They can't take credit for your rise. They can only take the blame for inspiring it. You didn't just outgrow them, you outclassed them. The same people who once looked down on you now have to look up to see you. You became the climax because you became unshakable. Every scar became a sentence. Every wound became wisdom. Every silence became strategy. And when the dust settled, you were still standing, not as a casualty of their story, but as the author of your own. Now, they tell the story differently. They downplay their part, soften their guilt, twist the details. But no matter how they frame it, one truth remains: you were never their victim. You were the plot twist they couldn't predict. So when they say your name now, it carries weight. Not pity, not curiosity, respect. Because you didn't just survive their chaos, you redefined it. You taught them that not every ending is tragic, and not every silence is surrender. Sometimes, the quietest moment in the story is the most powerful one of all, the climax. And that's who you are now, the calm after the storm, the evolution they never saw coming, the story they wish they could rewrite. But it's too late. The ending is already written. The lesson is already learned. You were never meant to die in their plot. You were meant to end it. You were never the casualty. You were always the climax. They still replay it in their minds, the part where they thought they'd ruined you. They remember the moment they delivered the final blow, expecting you to crumble, to beg, to break. But instead, you smiled. Calm, collected, dangerous. That was the first sign they missed the calm before the reckoning. You weren't lost. You were calculating. You weren't broken. You were becoming. They didn't realize the storm they unleashed when they underestimated your silence. You didn't fight back because you were scared. You stayed quiet because you were done. There's a difference. They thought your lack of reaction meant defeat, but it was discipline. You were saving your energy for the transformation that would make them irrelevant. You were turning their betrayal into blueprint. It's funny, isn't it? They thought they had you cornered, that you were another pawn in their game. They never knew you were the one who designed the board. They were playing checkers while you were mastering chess. Every move they made against you only revealed more about them, their weakness, their ego, their fear. And while they were too busy trying to expose you, they ended up exposing themselves. Now they whisper. They pretend they've moved on, but they still look for your shadow in every room. They still measure others by you, wondering how someone they once belittled became the standard. That's the curse of underestimating the quiet ones. They think silence means submission, when in truth, it means strategy. You didn't react emotionally because you already knew how it would end. And when it ended your way. No revenge, no theatrics, no mess. Just distance, just silence, just undeniable growth. That's what makes it burn. You didn't have to destroy them. They destroyed themselves trying to destroy you. The collapse they planned for you became their own downfall. They were loud when they thought they'd won. Now, they're quiet, confused, haunted. Because while they wasted time plotting your pain, you built peace, and peace is power. You didn't need to prove your worth. Your evolution did it for you. The very things they tried to use against you became your foundation. Their rejection built your resilience. Their lies fueled your clarity. You became everything they claimed you could never be: calm, controlled, powerful. Not because you wanted to prove them wrong, but because you stopped needing their validation altogether. That's what they'll never understand. Your victory wasn't revenge. It was release. You let go of their chaos. And in doing so, you won a game they didn't even realize you were playing. Now, they see it. The glow, the peace, the unbothered energy that doesn't chase or explain. It unsettles them, because people who manipulate chaos don't know what to do with peace. They can't control someone who doesn't react. They can't guilt someone who doesn't care. You became a mirror, one that forces them to face the ugliness they tried to bury under your name. They call it coldness, but it's not cold, it's clarity. It's what happens when you finally see people for who they are, not who you wanted them to be. They mistook your loyalty for weakness, your kindness for naivety, your silence for fear. And by the time they realized the truth, you were gone out of reach, out of their control, out of their story. You didn't just survive, you ascended. You turned the pain into armor, the lessons into strategy, and the past into poetry. You became untouchable because you learned how to walk away without leaving pieces of yourself behind. They're still trying to figure out how you did it, how you stood in the ruins they built for you and turned them into a throne.